Good morning and welcome to our February Brown Bag Lunch seminar from Generations Magazine. I'm Malin Moore, your host for the webinar. I'm also the webmaster for Generations Magazine, and I recently started as the accounts coordinator too. I have many hats at the magazine, and if you're interested in becoming a partner, I'm the guy to get in touch with. My contact information is on the website. Just go to the contact list and you'll see all that. It's great to have you all here today. And remember that during the webinar, you can post questions that our guest speaker will see. Just hit your chat button on the Zoom. And if you're on Facebook, might have to put it in the comments. A reminder that if the webinar is being recorded, and if you can't watch it all, you can always go back and watch a rerun later on. Just go to our website, which is generations808.com. And then click on the link that says multimedia, and you'll see the Brown Bag Lunch seminars listed there. You can watch this one, of course, and you can also go back a number of months and watch some of our older ones too. Our speaker today is Kylie Maneja of Ilima at Lejano Senior Living. Today, we're going to learn how to recognize when your loved ones need more help than you or their current caregiver can provide. And we'll also get some tips on starting that sometimes difficult conversation about senior living. So let's turn things over now and say hello to Kylie at Ilima at Lejano.
All right, sounds good. So hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. My name is Kylie Maneja, and I am the sales director at Ilima Lejano Senior Living in Kapolei. Today, we will be focusing on starting the conversation about senior living with your aging loved one. First off, I would like to say mahalo to Generations Magazine for allowing me to present and share my knowledge with the community. Let me just go into a little bit of my background so you get to know me a little bit better. I am a local girl born and raised on the leeward side of Oahu. I received my Bachelor of Science in Community Health from Hofstra University in New York and my Master's in Health Administration from University of Scranton in Pennsylvania. Upon graduating, I received a job offer working for an orthopedic distributorship specializing in sports medicine and trauma. This was my first experience in having tough conversations as I needed to discuss best practices with well-known surgeons in hospitals. I returned to Hawaii after living in New York for 7 years and started working for a hospice organization, which I absolutely fell in love with. Then I moved to Los Angeles for my fiance's job and worked for another hospice organization. I covered the Santa Monica and Beverly Hills area with big name hospitals of UCLA Medical and Cedars-Sinai. Most times I met with families to discuss the hospice benefit, which is another tough conversation to have. Now I have been with Ilima for almost 2 years and absolutely love it. I am the first contact for families and their loved ones. And most times families need a lot of education on senior living because they just don't know where to start. If Ilima sounds like a great fit after a conversation and them visiting, the next question families ask is, how do I get my loved one there? They don't want to move. And that is what we will focus on today. Not going to lie, but most times bringing up the topic of needing to move out of their home and into someplace else can be tough. So I'm hoping to provide you with some education, tools, and tips to assist in having the conversation. So we'll get started. Let's see. All right, so here's a scenario that's happened before. So you've noticed over the past few weeks that your loved one who lives alone has been slowing down. They barely clean the house or cook for themselves. They rely on frozen microwave dinners. You decide that you're going to bring up the conversation about moving out of their house into a senior community. You sit them down at Sunday family dinner and say, "Mom, I think it is time to move into a nursing facility." She's shocked, as this was not a conversation you two had before. She replies, "No, I'm not moving. Stop worrying about me." You say, "No, you need to move." She replies, "Where will I move?" And you respond, "I don't know, but I will find someplace." So looking at this scenario that's happened before and that families have brought up, there are some things that I would suggest not doing, and we'll dive more into it. But the first being the conversation, you're bringing up the conversation when you start noticing signs of your loved one needing help. The conversation should be brought up a little bit earlier so that they're involved in the decision-making process, and that's so you can look for signs on when it might be time. The second being the time and place of bringing up the topic. Your loved one does not want to be surprised with this information during Sunday family dinner when they're trying to enjoy themselves. So time and place makes a big difference. Next, what words you choose and the tone sets the mood. Saying, I think, or telling them what they want, what they need to do makes them put their walls up. This is especially true if you're raised by this person or if you are their child. They still look at you as their child, so they should be the ones telling you what to do and not vice versa. Finally, not doing research or providing some options to your loved one during the initial conversation does not ease their mind. And again, there's no right way or one size fits all, but I can provide some tips or suggestions that you can utilize. All right, so according to AARP, 77% of adults 50 and older want to remain in their homes for the long term. That number has been consistent for more than a decade. So now the question is, can those 77% of adults 50 years and older remain in their home safely? Because we all know that they want to, but can they? So here's more data from AARP. So 79% said they would need to modify bathrooms with grab bars or no-step showers. 71% said their home has inside and outside accessibility issues. 61% said they would need an emergency response system. And finally, 48% said they would need smart home devices like a voice-activated home assistant or a doorbell camera. Surveys also show that between 60 and 80% of seniors do not want to be a burden to their families. So now this brings up the fact that seniors want to remain at home, but do not want to be a burden to their families. This statement can be contradictory because in some cases, remaining at home can lead to dependence on family members to deal with care needs and home upkeep. The family member or members are the ones responsible for coordinating all the care, whether they're hiring landscapers or a cleaning agency to help with the upkeep of the house or private caregivers. And of course, if families are able to make this happen for their loved one, then that's absolutely great. But sometimes this is not possible. And for this reason, we need to have these tough conversations with your loved ones. If plan A doesn't work, then when it may be time to move out, then you need to move to plan B. So if plan A doesn't work, then when should we move to plan B? So some tips that we're going to go over and that are recommended, we'll dive more into it. One, research senior living options. So in the opening scenario, we saw that the adult child answered, I don't know, when their mom asked, where will I go? You want to be prepared as possible to help ease their worries. Secondly, start the conversation early and ensure the conversation is ongoing. You don't want to wait until your loved one slows down or when you observe signs of your loved one starting to lose their independence or declining. Starting the conversation early is also important because the conversation is not a one-time thing. The conversation is ongoing, especially because most aging individuals want to stay in their home. So you will run into some roadblocks or resistance. Third, understand the root causes for the resistance. Finding out why they don't want to move is important because perhaps there is a solution. And finally, using a positive and empathetic tone will help ease the conversation. So let's focus on tip number one, research family research types of senior living options. Most individuals are not aware of the type of senior living options that exist. The researching part is one of the most important parts because you want to find a good fit for your loved one. And of course, cost is always a concern for everyone involved. You also want to be able to answer their questions when you bring up the conversation. So first type, we have fee simple senior living. Second, assisted living or licensed assisted living community. Third, continuing care retirement communities, also known as CCRC. nursing home, skilled nursing, and residential care home. So fee simple senior living. So these types of communities offer condos, apartments, or cottages that are bought and sold on the housing market as fee simple condominiums. Usually buyers can be any age, but the resident who occupies the unit needs to be 55 years and older. The units can also be rented out. Most come with amenities such as a community room, clubhouse, pool, or gym. There will usually be a maintenance fee for upkeep of the community or housekeeping for your units. It depends on the community, but sometimes it might be for strictly independent folks where there's no assisted living on site. But again, it depends on the community. The two that I do know of in Hawaii is Olaloa in Mililani, and also one Kalakaua in near Waikiki. Some communities offer assisted living on site where there might be additional fees required for nursing care, meal service, etc. And then licensed assisted living or senior living communities. Most are rental communities where a one-time community fee or entrance fee is required to become a resident. The entrance fee, of course, varies by community. There are usually various care options, and it just depends on what the community is licensed for. So even though they're licensed assisted living communities, some will offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So that question you would ask directly to the community or the sales director or the nursing director, resident relations, one who has more information about that. Some communities might be also licensed by floor or apartments. What this means is, say your loved one moves into the community as an independent resident. If the community is only licensed by floors, then once they need a level of care or once they need assisted living, they would move out of their independent living unit or apartment and move to a separate floor or apartment for assisted living. That means they're going to eat with new people if there's a separate dining room, do activities with other people as well. And if the community is a fully licensed senior living community, then what that means is each apartment or each floor is licensed for assisted living. So once that resident needs a level of care or a higher level of care, they can stay put, and all that happens is a personalized care plan is created for them. What's important about that too, being fully licensed, each apartment being licensed for assisted living versus licensed by floors, is that's really important if you're trying to have the conversation with your mom and dad or a couple to move out of their home, because most times when couples move, one starts declining or needs help before the other person. So at some communities, they're going to separate the two where you're going to be stuck paying two different monthly fees. And the main thing is they're not going to be able to reside with each other. And then if it's fully licensed, then couples can stay together despite differences in level of care. So understanding what the community is licensed for is important, because you need to know, is my loved one going to be stressed out if they have to keep moving? Is my loved one going to be stressed out, or is it going to cause problems if parents are separated? So that's something to keep in the back of your mind. And also many amenities are included in the monthly rate for assisted living communities or senior living communities. Of course, the amenities vary by community, but some common amenities are 3 meals per day, weekly housekeeping, transportation services, activities, etc. And then they might fix in other amenities into the cost. And of course, it varies by community. Maybe they might include cable and internet, a landline phone, or anything like that. If your loved one needs assistance, then a level of care fee would usually be added on top of that monthly rate. Most communities will have their registered nurses, aides, or other clinical associates employed by the community, but there are also a few communities that outsource all their care to different agencies, so that's important as well. You also want to find out at what point, if any, does my loved one need to move? Does the community accept wheelchairs? What happens if my loved one becomes bedbound? So that's something to think about if you are looking into the rental option for assisted living communities. Now you also have continuing care retirement communities. Like I said, that is also known as CCRCs. These types of communities usually require a large one-time fee or buy-in. Sometimes these communities are referred to as buy-in communities. In Hawaii, the buy-in fees that I know of could range from $400,000 to $1 million. There will also be a monthly service fee that your loved one will be responsible for. Residents at some communities do not own their units, but the good thing about that large lump sum is you're going to be offered guaranteed lifetime care, even if they run out of resources. For this reason, residents have the added security of receiving health care and a good support system. Majority of CCRCs offer varied levels of care within the community, such as assisted living, skilled nursing, and memory care. For this reason, they don't need to move out of the community. So even if a couple moves into a CCRC and now one needs skilled care, the positive is, even though that they're separated, the positive is they're staying within the community, so you can still visit them every so often or as needed. What's important to ask the community if you're going the CCRC route is what happens if they choose to leave the community, or what happens to my deposit or that buy-in fee if my loved one passes away? Does it go back to the power of attorney or the family, or does the community keep it? So that's one thing to important or keep in your mind for CCRCs. And then in Hawaii, we have a lot of hundreds of residential care homes. So we usually call them private care homes in Hawaii. The mainland uses the term boarding cares, but they're, in the end of the day, they're all the same thing. Care homes provide more of a family-like environment. They're usually located in a residential neighborhood and are regulated and licensed by the State of Department of Health, Office of Healthcare Assurance. They come in all sizes as well. The care providers are usually certified as nursing assistants. Now, there are different types of licenses for care homes. The licensing will determine on how many residents can be at the home at one time and what type of care the caregivers can provide. Then you also have foster care homes to serve 1 to 3 adults who have been certified by a physician to need care in a nursing facility. The foster care homes need to have a certain number of Medicaid residents for every one private pay resident. Your loved one will benefit from this type of setting if they need more one-on-one care. You might also need to hire a case management agency to oversee your loved one's care. Case management agencies are mandated in foster care homes. All right, so of course there's myths about senior living, which could cause some resistance when you're having the conversation. So the first one being, I'll lose my independence. So many confuse living independently with living on their own. However, most senior living communities, you can be as independent as you want. Moving into a community might provide less responsibilities, such as home ownership, which allows your loved one the freedom to focus on new hobbies or things that they wish they could spend more time doing. The next one is living at home is cheaper than a senior community. While cost varies by community, you're right, it's not cheap. However, the average cost of senior living is often comparable or even less than receiving the same services and support at home, because if you can receive support at home, if that's what they really want, then that's great. But then you have to work in caregiving costs, maintenance costs. So that's landscapers, cleaning agencies, and all of that. And you're still coordinating that care. So what's nice about senior living is everything is included in the community, such as maintenance. So your loved one does not need to upkeep or repair their home anymore. And you don't need to worry about your loved one, saying, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna, my sink is broken, I'm gonna fix my sink. And then they bend over and something happens. So this also provides peace of mind for families. Third, I won't have any privacy. So most communities have private units, and privacy is respected by all of the senior living community residents and associates. When your loved one doesn't feel like socializing, they don't need to. And finally, Senior communities are depressing. Some picture senior living communities as institutions. You might have the image of a hospital or a similar institution. However, most senior communities are home-like and comfortable. Some might also have the thought that senior communities are depressing because they're only for really, really old people. So there are age ranges, but most residents are active and want to continue to be engaged in activities and socialize with others. And that's the good thing about being in a senior living community, because you're not isolated from others and there's always a good support system. This is also why scheduling in-person tours for communities that you're interested are important. Okay, so benefits of senior living communities. So help when you need it. So the resident will have easy and immediate access to healthcare. There are different options of healthcare available if and when the resident needs it. Secondly, intellectual stimulation. Many activities are offered throughout the day at senior living communities: educational seminars, crafts, group exercise classes, ukulele and singing classes, lei making, card games, etc. They provide mental stimulation, which may lower the risk of long-term cognitive decline. Third, safety and security for kupuna. So senior communities will have a disaster preparation plan. There are also on-site clinical team members that can assist if your loved one isn't feeling well. Communities are also designed for seniors, which may include step-in showers, emergency pool cords, grab bars in bathrooms, ramps, elevators, and hand railings in the hallways. Fourth, healthier lifestyle. So daily exercise classes that are well supervised can help improve joint pain, mobility, and cognitive function. Communities may also offer specialized diets or dietitian approved meals for those with diabetes, high cholesterol, low sodium diets, and all of that. And finally, extra support. So when a resident moves into a community, the staff and other residents become an extra layer of support which the resident can rely on. So the number one question that I get asked is, when is it time? When is it time for my loved one to move into a community? And this is why it's so important to have that conversation early, so that your loved one buys into the decision-making process, and you can decide, when do you think it's a good time for you to move out of your home, or when do you feel comfortable moving out of your home into a senior living community? So you shouldn't wait until your loved one exhibits these types of signs to start the senior living conversation. Like I said, you want to start it early. These are common signs that it is time for your loved one to move into a senior living community. Forgetting to take medications, that's a big one. So if your loved one is living by themselves, sometimes family members go over to their home and they see their pill box that they set up for the week, but maybe they didn't take one pill or they missed a day. Isolation and lack of socialization, that's also a big one. So we've seen that, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Is since the older individuals, they're at higher risk, a lot of them are isolating themselves. And what's that causing is lack of socialization and also depression. Unable to make doctor appointments. Frequent hospitalizations is a big one as well. Maybe they're falling, maybe frequent UTIs, which means maybe it's hard to upkeep, their ADLs. A house is hard to maintain. Maybe now they're hoarding some things or not cleaning properly. Lack access to proper nutrition, like that scene I gave. Now they're microwaving all their meals, or maybe they're even skipping meals. Or the main one is the main caregiver is stressed and tired. So tip number one, like I said, educate yourself. So when you might think it is time to try and ask your loved one's PCP what their thoughts are, you can also start this early so they can note it in their charts, and you can involve the PCP in your thought process, and maybe they can even provide some recommendations. Sometimes the aging adult also needs to hear it from someone else, such as a medical professional, because that's someone that they trust, and sometimes hearing it from someone else works a little bit better. So also you want to set a budget. How will it be funded? And then finally, And finally, narrow down list and set up in-person tours. So when you set a budget, make sure you know of your loved one's monthly income, assets, pension, social security, or whatever they're receiving on a monthly basis. That way you can help them feel at ease when cost comes up. Your loved one might even have a long-term care policy. Who knows? Sometimes when someone calls me and I ask, okay, are they planning on selling their house or do they have a long-term care policy? Have you guys talked about how you're going to fund senior living? Sometimes they say, oh, you know what? I don't know if they have a long-term care policy. Let me look through their paperwork. And sometimes you'll be surprised they end up having one. Are they a veteran? These are all important items to know while creating a budget. And narrow down lists and set up in-person tours. So there are national or local referral agencies that are free to families that you can utilize. They can help set up tours or recommend some communities based on your needs and your budget. Finally, we live in a time where there are so many technological advances. Use the simple search engine and type in senior living communities near me. And some will populate, and then you can call them directly and ask questions and possibly schedule a tour. All right, so determine needed care level. So what does a typical day look like? During the conversation with your loved one, you want to know when they can no longer be safe or care for themselves in their home. It would be helpful to know if they have any mobility issues, if they're receiving proper nutrition, who manages their medications, or do you need to always call them to remind them of appointments or to make sure they have to heat up their leftovers. So once you get past the initial conversation, the ongoing conversations might look like this. I am more open to senior living, but would not consider it until I need medication management or a more senior friendly environment. And like I said, that's how the more ongoing conversations are going to happen. And education to what you're going to come across is different levels of care. And that could be kind of mind-boggling or confusing for some folks because they might think their loved one is independent, but they're actually assisted living. So when you're doing your research, you're going to come across different levels of care. Just to go over them briefly, the first is independent living. This is for those who can provide for their own needs, including activities of daily living without the burden of home upkeep. Assisted living for those who need assistance with activities of daily living, such as medication management, reminders, escorting, bathing, toileting, all of those ADLs that they need help with. That does not need around the clock care or one-on-one care. Skilled nursing for those who require 24/7 physical and medical care outside a hospital setting. So skilled nursing care includes wound care, IV therapy, injections, catheter care, physical therapy, and monitoring of vital signs and medical equipment. And finally, you have memory care as well. So a lot of people, when they first call, they say, "Oh, my mom or dad or uncle or auntie, they need memory care." And when discussing with it more, it's because yes, they have some form of dementia like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, but they're still high functioning. So that's not the time for memory care. So that's why an assessment before moving in is so important too. So memory care is specialized care for those with advanced dementia, such as Alzheimer's. Memory care communities provide a secure environment to prevent wandering and eloping. There are 24-hour care and supervision, and finally, memory enhancing activities to keep them engaged. All right, so setting a price point, you need to keep in mind the entrance or buy-in fee, maintenance fee, if any, monthly housing fee, other service fees, monthly care fee. So like I mentioned before, know about your loved one's finances and find out how senior living will be funded. How can a senior living community be funded? So these are some options. So assets that can be sold or leveraged, family contribution, Social Security, long-term care insurance, real estate assets, pensions, annuities, or other retirement income, veterans benefits. They have the aid and assistance, Medicare or Medicaid, Though Medicare can't pay for room and board, sometimes Medicaid can pay for, Medicaid has that room and board option. Medicare will just cover your health services. So if a hospice agency or home health agency needs to come into the community, that's what it's going to cover. And finally, life insurance policy. And so all of these things can be discussed with your financial advisor or a trust attorney or any of those individuals. You really need to sit down with them and try to go over everything. Of course, it's important to get the cost from the communities that you're interested in so you can sit down and kind of have a clearer picture of what you're going to go over and a clearer picture of the cost. And then you're going to narrow down list and set up in-person tours. So questions to think about or ask the communities during your tour. So one, is the lifestyle model, is it one size fits all? Do you offer dining choices at each meal, or is it pre-ordering? Do you need to pre-order for the week? Is there a flexible dining schedule? Can special dietary needs be accommodated? Are pre-ordered meals required? Is the community located close to points of interest? Is transportation for medical or personal needs available? Are there restrictions for laundry use? When it comes to health, wellness, and fitness, what are the wellness opportunities offered to residents and how often can you participate? Is there a well-equipped fitness center? Is that important to your loved one? Is there a swimming pool, if that's important to them as well? Security, safety, and experience. How long has the community been open? Who are the owners? How long has the community been under the same ownership? What is the staff model? Is there adequate staff? What is the turnover? And that's a huge one right now during the pandemic as well, because as we're seeing, there's a lot of shortages, in the hospitals and with different healthcare agencies. Who is responsible for monitoring the health and safety of your loved one? Is front desk assistance available 24/7 if you need to get a hold of your loved one? Are visitors allowed? And what about overnight guests? Supportive services, do you accept long-term care insurance? Like I said, if they do have long-term care insurance, it's important to read over that policy and call that organization and find out more about it. Is care staff available during designated hours of operation only? Are care plans fully customizable? Is there a continuum of care available? What is the community licensed for? Can couples stay together if care levels differ? What happens if a wheelchair is needed? Do you accept wheelchairs? What happens if the resident becomes bedbound? What happens if the resident runs out of funds? That's a big one as well. But like I said, that is a big question that we get. What happens if the resident runs out of funds? And at that point, the good thing about our system is once they're, I think it's below 2,500 or 2,000 worth of assets, then you can apply for Medicaid. And like I said, foster care homes, they accept Medicaid. Focusing on COVID-19, what is the percentage of staff that are fully vaccinated? Are residents required to be vaccinated? What plans are in place if a resident tests positive for COVID-19? Are in-person visits allowed? How do you know if a staff member or resident has COVID-19? What are the restrictions? So if anyone wants this printout, of course I can print it. It will be available for you guys, or I know we're recording the presentation, but these are very important questions to ask when you're doing your research, when you're talking to the person over the phone, or even when you're doing a tour. Now, tips for a better discussion. Have the conversation as early as possible. You don't want to wait for a health event or an emergency to occur. You don't want your loved one to go into a hospital and them tell you that it would be best to find a senior living community. When this happens, everyone is stressed and everyone is scrambling to find a place. And then you're trying to research. Sometimes the community that has good reviews or that you heard of from a friend might have a wait list now, might have a 5-month wait list, and that's not going to work within your time frame. And then sometimes you can only see 2 communities before choosing one because you are in a time crunch. So you want to pick a time, you want to have the conversation early so they can be involved in the process. Also, you want to pick a time when there are no distractions or other obligations. You want to choose a time during the day when they're usually in a good mood. This is especially true for those that have been diagnosed with dementia and that are progressing, because there are good days and bad days. So you want to choose a good time for that. And also, you don't want to shock them with a topic during a family dinner like we've seen in the scene, where there's other people around that's not going to be involved in the decision-making process. Choose your words wisely. Terms like nursing home, assisted living, facility, patient, or institution, they can create a negative image. Instead, you want to use words such as senior living community, resident, or care services. And that's why I keep using the term senior living community throughout my presentation as well. Get others to help, recruit others. Talk with your siblings, aunts, uncles, etc., close friends about how to best have these type of conversations and work together. This step usually happens during the ongoing conversation, because maybe you brought up the conversation initially, they're still resistant. Sometimes hearing it from someone else might work, or might even get them to at least come tour the properties with you. Let them tour. You don't want to overwhelm them with touring a lot of communities, which is why you should tour first, or I recommend you touring first, especially if they're resistant. Let them tour the communities that you believe will be a good fit. Also, if the community allows it, let them have a complimentary meal or participate in a resident activity where they can kind of get the feel of the community or what a typical day looks like. So if you brought up the conversation and they ask, where will I go? I don't want to go into a nursing home. Then you can respond something like this: Dad, I took the initiative to research and tour a few communities in advance that I think you would love. I would love for you to come see them. And if you do not like any of them, then we can continue our search. Listen to their concerns. Listen to their concerns. I won't make any friends. That's a big one that I hear a lot. So I won't make any friends. The community has a lot of residents that I believe you will get along with. They offer many activities that you can choose from, and also you can socialize with others your age. Second, nobody will visit me. The community wants families and guests to visit their loved ones. They even offer overnight stays and guest meals. You can always call me and I will always visit you. Third, I can't leave my cat, right? So I can't leave my cat, or I can't leave my dog. Mom, I know you would never leave your cat. That's why I found a fabulous senior community that is also pet friendly. Next, I don't have the funds. I crunched the numbers and you absolutely have the funds to live in a senior living community. If you want, we can schedule a meeting with our financial advisor so you can ask them questions as well. That's a big one. I don't have the funds. That's a big one where I see where the spouse has just lost their loved one, and now they can't stay in their home anymore in a safe way. So they have to move into a senior living community. And a lot of times, what families tell me is, my dad or mom or whoever passed set up my parent who is looking into moving into senior living. They set them up very well so that this could happen, because they know that they're going to get depressed if they can't socialize or they can't stay safe in their own homes. And that's a big one that always happens when we're on tours, is the families explaining that to their loved one. A next one is, I won't be able to bring my favorite chair or grandfather clock. The community has multiple floor plans that you can choose from, because I want you to bring your personal belongings and antiques that you collected over the years. Ensure you offer a solution to any question. And that's why I said, do your research early and visit the communities. That way, when they ask questions, you can respond properly. If you don't have the answer, respond with, don't worry, we'll call so-and-so and ask them what our options are. And if they're still resistant, just remember that it takes multiple conversations, which is why you should have that conversation early. You might also need to recruit others, like I said, who are close to your loved one. Sometimes you might need to recruit others just for your loved one to visit. And sometimes that person that can get across to your loved one, sometimes they need to actually come on the tours too. 2 is speak to the community and find out if they can spend the day there to get a feel. Some communities have a 60-day or 2-month guarantee. This is when your loved one moves in and say they're not adjusting well, and you know what, or something happened in the community where you're like, oh, you know what, yeah, this definitely is not a good fit. And so what that guarantee offers, depending on the community, is sometimes your community feedback, that's fully refundable up until 60 days, sometimes the rent back. So it just depends on community. So sometimes they do have guarantees in place. Um, and also there are short-term stays if communities have apartments, units, or beds open. This is called respite stays. So usually there's a minimum number of days that you need to stay, sometimes 10, where the rate is prorated to the daily amount. By doing this, your loved one can try it out, right? Because sometimes families say, is there any way where they can just come and just try it out? Well, that would be the try it out period using the guarantee or the respite stay. However, if you do choose this respite stay option, I don't think 10 days is enough. You need to give it a minimum of 30 days because it's like moving a kid going to a new school. There is a transition period. There's going to be some anxiety, some stress, some nervousness. So they need some time to transition and to get acclimated to that community. So sometimes 30 days if you're doing the respite, but also you have to be cost effective and pair that up if they do have a guarantee and what's going to be more cost effective for you. Third, attend special events that the community holds. Sometimes communities hold chef tasting panels where you can get invited to. Sometimes they have happy hours, live concerts, or maybe like a special bingo night. So these are big too, so that your loved one can get a feel for the community. And this helps them become more open to the idea of senior living and overcome the myths that they've heard over the years or seen in the movies or TV shows or anything like that. And finally, continue to reassure. This is especially important if your loved one doesn't want to move, but knows they need to move. We usually see this with those with dementia or other memory impairments. What I usually like to tell families is to try to make it seem temporary, because once they step their foot in the door, it's up to the community, it's up to the community staff, the nurses, to help them feel comfortable. Of course, this varies by community and what they have in place for new residents. But it's just getting their foot through the door. And like I said, you have to make it seem kind of temporary, especially if they have dementia or anything like that. So an example is, Mom, I love you and care for you. For this reason, I want you to be safe. And we talked about this in the past, that if you no longer are safe living at home, then we would find a safe and secure senior living community for you to move into. All I want you to do is try it for 60 days, just 60 days. If you still want to move out of the community in 60 days, then we will find an alternative option. Don't you worry. And I like to tell families that a lot because, like I said, it's just getting their foot through their door, because I'm confident that my staff, my nurses, my wellness team, all of them are going to just kick in to make sure that this resident stays and feels at home, because that's what's most important. Because staff at the community should know this person is coming to us because they no longer can stay at home and because their family is trusting us to care for them. So try that. Like I said, make it kind of seem more temporary. It's not a permanent. Sometimes too, if the resident or the prospective resident or your loved one has the funds to at least fund a year for a senior living community. Sometimes they don't need to sell their home yet. That's a big one too. So I see a lot of residents move in, and then after maybe 12 months or 14 months, they end up putting their home on the market because they're just happy at the community that they've been in, and now they're finally ready to let go. So just to recap, so you want to do your research, start the conversation early and ensure it is ongoing. It's going to be multiple conversations, but you want to get that plan B in place if plan A doesn't work. Understand their resistance to move and provide solutions. Providing solutions is a big one when they do tell you about their worries, and use a positive and empathetic tone. Choose your words wisely. Don't try to use the terms, nursing home, facility, patient, or anything like that, because that could put a negative thought in their head. So again, use senior living communities, use resident, and all of those things. And that concludes my presentation. So again, my name is Kylie Maneja. I'm the sales director at Ilima Lejano in Kapolei. I am available by phone or email. So if you have any questions, even if it's not specific to my community, I am here to help. I love helping people. I love educating the community members. So please feel free to reach out to me with any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie. Great information. A couple of questions. What do you advise for people that have parents or loved ones here in Hawaii, but they live on the mainland, and they're the closest relatives that the person has? Are there any tips on that? Can you do it long distance, or do you have to wait till someone visits here to do everything?
Yeah, good question. So we do get that a lot. Sometimes families or their children moved away from Hawaii for jobs or to raise their families, but the parent just wants to stay in Hawaii. And sometimes if they're no longer to stay in their home, what happens is, that's why it's important to have that conversation as early as possible. So when this point comes, that there is a plan in place. So what the children usually do is, now at this point when their loved one is no longer safe living at home, you do see them visiting Hawaii more often, because you need to make sure that they're safe. And sometimes that adult child is waiting too long, or waiting to that point when they observe signs that they're no longer safe in the home. And that's why, like I said, it's important to have a plan B in place. And so what happens then is, like I said, we live in a good technological era now, where there's options for virtual tours, where we can do Zoom, we can do FaceTime to show the community. And depending on the community, they can do everything through DocuSign. We can do an assessment. We can even order transportation. It just depends on the community, to get your loved one here. And then we can help coordinate the move that way as well.
Very good. Tell us a little bit about your community, about Ilima at Lejano. Do you have all the different levels of care there?
Yeah, so we do. We're a month-to-month resort-style living community. We're the only kind on the leeward side. So we do offer independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So we are a part of Kisco Senior Living. So what's good about being a part of Kisco Senior Living, which has 20 communities nationwide, is we have a wealth of resources, which we've actually seen during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we've always kept a 3-month supply of PPE. We don't run out of masks. We do surveillance testing here. We have our own COVID-19 test kits. And so we've been really lucky. But even at Ilima, what our goal is to provide a safe and secure environment for the residents, while also offering, high quality programs, whether that be emotional programs or your entire well-being or your physical well-being and all of that. And we are a fully licensed assisted living facility. So we're not licensed by floors. Each apartment is licensed for assisted living. So what that means is independent residents and assisted living residents can mingle, and there's no separate, dining rooms or activity rooms for the different levels of care. Everyone can kind of stay together and socialize. And we have a really, really good community here, very pleasant residents, good staff. And right now we do currently have a wait list for all floor plans. But right now it just depends on the floor plan, but the estimated wait right now is about 3 months.
What's the population when it's full?
What was that?
How many residents do you have when it's full?
So we have 84 apartments. We have about 104 residents, and that's because we have couples. So like I said, since we're fully licensed, we are couples kind of seek us out because they want to stay together despite differences in level of care. So the waitlist process is pretty easy. So I always recommend people to come do in-person visits first and have a complimentary meal, which we can do outside on our back lanai. That way they can try the food, because, in Hawaii, food is so important to us. And so I always say, come try the food, because you're the one that's going to be eating it every single day. Right. And usually they come, they have a meal with us, they talk to our residents. And yeah, so I just encourage everyone to do in-person visits.
Okay. And speaking of COVID, and I realize a lot of people are going to be watching this in the future, but as of right now, February of 2022, what are are you still under strict COVID restrictions? And are all of the different communities around Hawaii, are they all kind of on the same page with that, or?
So the good thing is I know a lot of the executive directors and administrators from, the skilled nursing facilities, different senior living communities, they meet once a week and they kind of collaborate and share best practices. But it just depends on the community. So some, if they've had a big outbreak or anything like that, then they would restrict a lot of things such as activities or dining or anything like that. But like I said, it just depends on the community.
Yeah.
For us, we've been very, very lucky, and we're not locked down or anything like that. Our residents can leave and come and go as they please. And families can come in as long as they're fully vaccinated. That's just the big thing right now, is being fully vaccinated. And I think that goes across the board for all the communities. And for us too, our associates are 100% fully vaccinated with the booster. And like I said, being part of Kisco Senior Living, we do the surveillance testing. So it just depends on the positivity rate as well throughout the state of Hawaii, which we've been keeping a close call on, because as we've seen, the number of cases increase with Omicron. And so all we did was increase the surveillance testing for associates twice a week using the PCR nasal swab, and it's all paid for. And all the residents, they don't even need to do the nasal swab. All they need to do is spit in a cup. They use the FDA approved saliva method, and we just send it out for them to make sure that everyone's still negative.
Okay, very good. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, and then as you mentioned earlier, and you've got your contact information on the screen right now, that's great. And if somebody wants a copy of some of those questions, you had a really good slide with questions on it earlier. They can contact you and you can give them a printed copy or email.
Yes, of course. I'll be happy to give them a printed copy and email, or even if they contact Generations Magazine, Generations or yourself can reach out to me, and I'll be happy to share those questions with them.
Okay, perfect. Kylie, thank you very much. That was great. Appreciate it. And have a good afternoon and enjoy the rest of the week.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for watching today. And a reminder too, to go to our website for a replay of this, or to go to past webinars that we've had. Just go to generations808.com. Thanks, and we'll see you soon.